Okay, guys, I'll go ahead and begin. And if some people drift in, we'll just get them caught up later on. So my name is Michael Hensley, and I would just like to thank everybody at the New Mexico Art Educators Association for getting everything straightened out in such a short notice and doing such a great job to make this happen. I ad- really admire all the effort they put into this to make it work. It's pretty impressive. So thank you to everybody that made this happen. Uh, the topic for today is the art of drawing hands, comparative artistic anatomy. And basically, I feel that uh, drawing is probably one of the most difficult and challenging aspects of the visual arts. It's kind of the foundation and the base of all visual art activity. Oftentimes, people have fantastic imaginations and are limited simply by their technical abilities. On the other side of the coin, though, you have some people that have fantastic technical abilities and struggle with imagination. That tends to get lost, I think, from youth to adulthood. Sometimes you have to kind of refine that creative aspect. But anyway, in terms of drawing, I think most people would agree that drawing hands is arguably the most challenging of all the drawing activities. So I thought it would be fun to put together a little workshop here on the art of drawing hands. And we'll conclude the end of the session with a comparative artistic anatomy section where we'll look at the hands and feet of a variety of different animals and see if we can try to figure out what belongs to what and in reality how similar they actually are. Um, so basically, a little bit about me. Again, my name is Michael Hensley. I live in Taos, New Mexico, and I currently teach at Taos High School. All my classes are available as dual credit classes through the University of New Mexico, Taos. And I grew up in this area. I was actually born in New Orleans, Louisiana, but I grew up in Taos. We moved here when I was 4, and I've lived here for pretty much my whole life. Went to the public schools, graduated here, and then upon graduation, I left back east and initially went upstate to Woodstock, New York, and studied at the Woodstock School of Art, and then later transferred to and moved into New York City and went to school at the Art Students League and the National Academy of Design. And I studied there for a number of years. And then when my mother got ill and I moved back to Taos to help my family and help take care of my mom um, in her kind of the last years of her life. And I just have stayed. I love this area. There's nothing quite like northern New Mexico. I was blessed to have grown up in a very artistic family. My father's an artist. We had a gallery in Taos for probably close to 40 years. So my whole life has always been around the arts. So that's kind of a little bit about me. Uh, Basically, what we're going to do tonight, I kind of have broken up into 3 little sections. When I'm teaching these throughout the year, I'll cover a lot of these different aspects throughout the course of a year. So what this is just sort of a little introduction into a variety of different aspects of drawing the human hand that can be done in a variety of different ways. Uh, the first activity that I want to do is to kind of go over the idealized proportion of the human hand. And we'll talk a little bit about all those little intricate things, and I'll show you a few different kind of tricks of the trade that might help with that. And then next, I want to do a little section on gesture drawing. In that aspect, or for that portion, everybody will get to draw. So hopefully you have some drawing utensils and drawing paper handy. Um, and we'll try to do at least 2 gesture drawings and spend about 10 minutes on each. And I pre-recorded a couple of gesture drawing demonstrations just this week so that you could see the process that I go through. And I kind of completed those with a time lapse, so you could see how I shaded them in the end. And then I also have scanned the images so you could see the finished drawing. And then lastly, it will be the comparative artistic anatomy section. And that section will look at a variety of different hands and feet from different animals, and we'll try to figure out whether the anatomical models belong to what animal they belong to and whether they're actually the hand or the foot. So that's kind of the plan for that at this point. Uh, to begin with, what I thought we'd do is I would like to talk a little bit about the proportion of the hand. And basically, this is the anatomical model of the human hand. I'm assuming you guys can see this okay, right? So this is the human hand. We have in this area right here are the carpals. Then we have the metacarpals. And then the fingers are the phalanges. The phalanges, each of the four fingers, the four core fingers, have three. They're in the singular, they're referred to as phalanx. So this would be digit number 1, digit number 2, digit number 3, digit number 4, digit number 5. And this would be on the pointer finger, which would be digit number 2, the first phalanx is proximal, then we have medial, and we have distal. And what's unique about this is all the other animals that we're going to look at later on this evening will all have those same characteristics. But in terms of drawing the human hand, what's important to talk about right now is basically this section, which consists of the carpals and the metacarpals, can be drawn very simply as either a trapezoid shape or a rectangular shape. If I hold my hand up and we're looking at it, whether it's the palm view, the anterior view, or the backside, the posterior view, this section basically makes up a rectangular shape. It's not square, it's rectangular. So if I move my thumb in, you can really kind of see this shape. The other thing is a lot of people struggle with proportion. That's one of the challenges of drawing the human hand. So one thing that's really helpful to understand is when you're looking at the skeletal aspect, the distance right here from the base of the metacarpal of the third digit, the long finger, our middle finger, this section from here to here is 1/2 the distance from here to here of our finger. So whenever you quickly block in your rectangular shape, if you can add the second shape down below as the second half, keeping those the same proportion, you'll be off to a great start. Typically speaking, when you add the thumb, you can add a triangular shape. That will help. But in terms of proportion, get this half and half. The next thing that you'll notice, and this is kind of fun, I do this in my classes and everybody's slightly different, but if you hold your hand out in front of you right now, and you look at your pointer finger and your ring finger, and you have it extended out, which finger, and you can just think about this to yourself, but which finger is actually longer? In my particular case, my ring finger is slightly longer than my pointer finger. Everybody is slightly different. Some people, their pointer finger is longer. Some people, it's exactly the same. And one thing that's interesting to note is when we do this, and we're using all our extensor muscles in our lower arm, it's pulling these tendons taut. So it changes. If you flip your hand over the other way and look at your fingers, it may change. Like mine are now, my pointer finger and my ring finger are now the same. So proportionate wise, and they go about halfway up. So these two fingers will go about halfway up, or basically they'll end right at the base of the medial phalange. So these two come right up to about right here. So right, that distance right there. So if you keep these two fingers the same length when you're drawing them, these two, regardless of whether somebody's slightly different, it will always look right. So if you're going to just guess, if you keep that in mind, you'll end up in a pretty good situation. So it's interesting that if your hand is extended, how it pulls, because your tendon gets pulled in and it makes one finger shorter than the other. And in fact, if you do it on your hand, sometimes you can see the tendon get pulled over with the extensor muscles. So if you remember, this is the halfway point right here. This is the other halfway point. These two fingers go up right halfway into the distal phalange of the middle finger. They should never be longer than the middle finger. Then when you get to the pinky usually ends, as you can see right here, the pinky will end right at the base of the ring finger. So some people, when they're drawing hands, they always make the pinky too long or too short. But typically speaking, it ends right about here. You can see where it ends right about where that phalange, the distal phalange of your ring finger begins. The thumb, well, this is right in here is our proximal phalange of our pointer finger. The thumb ends about the halfway point of that finger. And this is pretty, there's always people that have exceptions or fall outside that norm. But generally speaking, if you can memorize this set of idealized proportions, you'll always end up with drawing a pretty good hand. And if you're trying to do something that looks exactly like the individual you're drawing, if you know all the rules to idealized proportion of drawing the hand, then you'll know where they're falling outside of those norms, and it makes it so much easier to capture the character once you've committed all that to memory. So the other couple of things that's interesting is when we look at the hand, the fingers will curl in. Sometimes people draw them and they have the fingers going out the other way. Well, it's not really possible. They have to, the pointer finger and the pinky finger slightly curl in. The ring finger also will slightly curl in. So when you're drawing a clenched fist, if we look at our fingers, you can see how this will curve and it slightly curves. If we close a clenched fist, they have to come in. A lot of times people draw a clenched fist and they'll make all the fingers look straight up and down across, and they don't do that. They actually, the pinky comes in and the pointer finger comes in. So in terms of proportion, that's something that's really important to keep in mind. And so let me just get to this section here. So you can see how I broke this down. So using the anatomical model that we just saw, this is the radius and the ulna. And the other thing that's really important is the width of the wrist. A lot of people, when you're beginning to learn to draw, the wrist is always made too thin. The wrist is right here where it connects to the carpals is actually the widest point of the wrist. It's further up that it's thinner, and that's where you might put a bracelet on and get it easily around your wrist. But the area right near the carpals is the thickest part. Bones always get thicker as they approach the joints, and they're thinner in the shaft in the middle area. Now we can see here, I've diagrammed in here the rectangular view of the hand, and you can see how it fits nicely in a rectangle. And the fingers curl in and the pointer finger curls in. And I've aligned here the proportions so that you can see that basically most individuals, their pointer finger and the ring finger are pretty much equal in lengths. Every individual varies slightly. One could be slightly longer than the other, but as long as you keep that as a truth, you'll be pretty close to accurate. The pinky finger ends right about the middle point here of the ring finger medial phalange. And your thumb comes about this middle point right in here. When you look at some of the greater apes, their thumbs can vary in size, but it's interesting to see how it works with the humans. So most, and here we can see, so here's a demonstration I did And I'll post a link here in 1 second where you can download, you can access. I put in Google Drive a document with all the videos that I currently have posted on drawing the human hand. And I have the links on a page, which if you would like to access, you're more than welcome to do that. And I did a demonstration a while back on this particular study of the hand. This is from the palmar view, the anterior view of the hand. And I indicated here, you can see the proportions that were indicated and the curvation of the fingers. And then I did the same thing here, showing the muscle structure of the human hand. So we started with the process with just this right up here is just the basic idealized proportion, keeping all that in mind, and then learning how to apply it in a drawing process and understanding the elements of drawing and the elements of shading and translating it from a photographic image to an artistic image. And then now then applying the muscles then over the surface. So this gets to the point now where what I'd like us all to do is, and I'll show you just show you 4 images real quick. What I'd like to do now is have all of you, if you have some drawing paper and pencils available, we'll spend about 10 minutes. We'll just do 2 gesture drawings, and I'll play the video while you can of my demonstration, and you can draw along with it, or you can draw your own hand while you're listening to it. The beginning portion of it's fairly light because I always draw really light in the beginning, so I can makes it easier to make changes. But I do a fairly quick gesture drawing, and then toward the end, I will do a time lapse where you can see the shading process. So here, let me just, these are the 4. So usually in my classes, I will have everyone do a front view hand, the anterior view. Then I have them do a side view hand. And then I will have them do the back side of the hand. And I then do a clenched fist so that you can see all the different angles that happen in those 4 views. So I've made recordings this week just for this conference so that you can watch all of these. There's probably not enough time to do all of that in this session. But so what I would like to do now is I was going to show this one first. So if you have a pencil and paper handy, this is what I recommend with a lot of my students is they use this tone tan paper. It's nice because you can work with color. You can then add highlights. I have the kids use either Prismacolor Premier or Verithin pencils. I personally like the Verithin pencils because you can get a great deal of detail with these. But I do definitely use the Premier for the highlights. I think they is much better for doing your highlights with than the Verithin pencils. And a very useful tool, and some people, at times when people are watching my videos, they wonder what this is. But this is a little mono zero eraser, and it's almost like a pencil. So if I want to just touch up a very fine little area or soften an edge somewhere, this is fantastic. So that's a Tombow mono zero eraser. And then the other thing, if I have a big area to mess up, I always use a pink pearl eraser. So what I wanted to do, and I did my demonstrations this week since we're not live, I would have done it for you live in class, but I went ahead and recorded this. And so what I wanted to do is if you guys get out your pencil and paper, and you can either draw your hand. So the first one I'm going to do is the back of the hand. I'll show you the back of the hand because I talk a little bit about proportions in this one. And let me get this set up for you so that you can watch it while you're drawing. And then when it ends, I'll click back off and come back in. And then maybe if somebody would like to share what they've done, that would be awesome. So here we go. Let me get this set up. Hang on 1 second here. I want to make sure I mute this or you'll get distortion. This will be a gesture drawing of the posterior view of the hand. It is also known as the dorsal view. So once again, I want to start off with a rectangular shape, just a very simple shape to get the back side of the hand, and I'll extend the wrist. Remember, it's a little bit wider through here. And then I'm just going to try to very lightly figure in the angle and the proportions of where I want the fingers to more or less end. So if this is the base, just going over proportions a little bit real quickly here, basically what we have is this distance in here to the top of the metacarpal to the end of the finger would be about the same. So we want to more or less get this kind of in line with the proportions, and the rest can fit around it. Then I want to add off this rectangular shape, I want to add this little triangular shape so that we know where the thumb is going to come out, right through here. And just a quick gesture. So in just a few quick shapes added in, we can kind of block in what we feel will be the gesture of the hand. And then once we get that laid out, the proportions and the general shapes, we can go in and start actually articulating the anatomy. So at this point now that I kind of have that blocked in and I know more or less where things are, I'll start very quickly adding the phalanges. We'll start off with the pointer finger we have coming through here. And it's important to note that the pointer finger and the pinky are going to slightly curl in, even though the fingers may be separated. And I'm trying to do a fairly just simple conventional hand here so that I can go over some of this what I feel is useful information. So right in here we have the knuckle, and these are the part of the metacarpals. We have the carpals in here, then the metacarpals run through here, then we have our phalanges, which are our fingers. And the first row of fingers are known as the proximal phalanx, right through here, proximal phalanges. And it's going to end about halfway. Your pointer finger and your ring finger will end about halfway, half the length, right at the base of the distal phalange of your middle finger. So I'm going to get my hand to have a little gap in here. Trying to draw my hand while I'm talking. And I want to make sure I get the length more or less correct in here. And so we'll have the ring finger coming along in here. Keep those two a little closer together. And then the pinky is going to end about halfway up the medial phalange of the ring finger. So we want to make sure we keep all those portions in check. That way it should look fairly realistic when it's all said and done. So this, remember, we want this to curl in. This needs to curl in slightly. This is going to end right up in here. This is going to have a slight curl this way. This will have a slight curl in through here. A little thicker there. And we want to get a little bit of this base in there. And we have this little fleshy portion of the thumb. This section in here. Remember the thumb, we have opposable thumb. And the thumb only has a proximal and a distal phalange. It does not have a medial phalange. And thumb gonna come more or less through here. Knuckle up in there. So we have that width through there. And it's gonna come in. Then we have right in here the metacarpal. And it's gonna come through here. And we have the tendons of the extensor muscles come through here and through here, through here. And so just very lightly, I want to also point out that the knuckles wrap around at this angle. So they don't run straight across. They differ in length. Each finger, when you get to the the phalange, the first phalange and the second phalange and the third phalange, which is the proximal, medial, and distal, they all reduce in size by 1/3. So that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind. The proximal phalange. Now for the medial phalange, and then now we add the distal phalange, which has the fingernail on top. And then we have that little fold through here. Coming in here, and this section goes behind. We have this fold coming in front. So now we have just a quick, nice, loose gesture. Remember, we started off with just a simple rectangular shape. We found the distance from here to the top of the metacarpal, and from the metacarpal to the end, and that is the halfway point between here and here. And of your middle finger, that's a good indication for proportion. It makes it very helpful to kind of keep in mind. There's, with foreshortening and lots of other things that can happen that can change, but that's just a good general rule of thumb. It's always helpful to keep in mind. What's interesting is if you look at the back side of the hand, if I'm looking at the back side of the hand and I bend my fingers slightly, you can see where this section may appear to be a little shorter and this section appears to be a little longer. However, if I turn my hand the other way, this seems much longer, this seems much shorter. So that has to do with the fleshy folds and the skin and how it falls over the bone structure. You can see here there's a webbing in this section between each of the fingers. It changes it, so when you view it from the palmar side, it creates the illusion that this is larger, this is smaller. This is on the back side would appear smaller, this would appear larger. But if you just keep that in mind and always keep the bones, because the actual osteology of the hand, the bone structure on the middle finger on this section is pretty much half and half. And then you would just think about adding the fleshy folds. So this is just a quick gesture drawing Just a quick explanation of proportion, quick gesture drawing. What I will do is I'll spend a little bit of time here and I will finish shading it in a time lapse so that you have a little bit more time to work on your own drawings. But you can see the process of how I would go about shading it and doing a more complete finished drawing of the posterior view of the hand. So now on to the time lapse.
You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, so I apologize. The videos always start off very light. I always draw very light in the beginning so that I allow myself to have room to make changes. And that's something that I really stress with my students, that it's very important that in the beginning that they draw very light so that they can adjust and make changes and corrections. A tendency for students when they first begin is to draw immediately, make everything hard, dark very quickly, and they kind of lock themselves in, and it makes it almost impossible to make changes. Especially, I encourage my students to use the Prismacolor pencils, which are a wax-based pencil, which is ultimately almost impossible to erase. They're high-quality pencils, and so that was kind of a little bit of an explanation and seeing the process of how I begin from beginning to the end of the backside of the hand. For the second one that I'd like to show now, and it will be, I guess, before we go to the next one, is there anybody that would like to share at this time, maybe the drawing or the gesture drawing that any of you guys were able to do during the time? Oh, awesome. I love it. Thank you. Proportions are good. Anybody else have one they'd like to share? I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So I sometimes, even when I'm in class and I'm doing my demonstrations, if it's not going well, I can hardly wait till it's over and flip the page, and so I don't have to look at it. Some days go like that. Anyway, so what I want to do now is I wanted to do, I'm not going to do the front view or the lateral view, the side view. I was going to skip now to just the clenched fist for the second video. So if you guys would like to do a clenched fist from the front view or 3/4 view, however you like, and see how you do, and I'll give a little explanation while I'm drawing in the process. And we'll just do 2 for today, and then we'll move on because I really would like to get to the last section where we do the comparative anatomy, because that, I think you'll hopefully find that sort of pretty interesting and enjoyable. So here we go. Let me do the second one. And again, it'll start off light in the beginning, and then it'll get darker as it gets toward the end, and it'll finish in a time lapse. Let me make sure I mute this or you'll have feedback. For this activity, we're going to do a quick gesture drawing of the hand as a clenched fist. We'll do it from the palmar view, the anterior view of the hand. We'll start off very lightly right here with a little rectangular shape. For the thumb area, we can add light triangular shape, and that'll kind of get us the essence of the hand and the proportions. And then we can start, and then let's just quickly throw in a wrist. So it's another rectangular shape coming down here. We'll have the tendinous portions coming through here. We can add the details later. But very quickly, the idea is just to get as much information in as we can. So here we'll have a cylinder type shape of the area that leads up to the thumb. And then the fingers, I got my fingers coming across up through here, slightly at this angle. So I just want to get an overall feeling of the generic shape first, and then I can eventually go back in and start adding in the anatomical structure, articulating the anatomy. So now that we have roughly a shape roughly blocked in, the central figure will have finger will come in somewhat through this angle. And it's important to note that the fingers, when the hand is closed, the fingers come in at an angle. They don't go straight up and down. So this quick gesture through here, and we have another quick gesture, the pinky turning in, and we have the pointer finger coming down more or less through here. We'll have to fix and clean some things up in a bit. And then we have our thumb coming up at this angle. And we can kind of think of it as a plane. We have the top surface, rectangular shape through here, and this shape coming across through here. And there's a side plane through here, side plane through here, and then we have this connection through here. And we'll make this a little bit larger through this area. So a few adjustments along the way. So very quickly, we just got to have a real light gesture in just a short matter of time. And again, we're just trying to capture the character, the gesture of the hand, and not so much worrying about drawing every little detail in the beginning. We want to start simple, work fast, and keeping in mind. So now I'm thinking a little bit about the anatomy. So what we have coming right through here at this angle, these are the medial phalanges. You can I can kind of see the bone structure here on my hand with a little bit of the fleshy forms, and this is going to come down through here, right into there, and then this is going to drop lower. I've got this coming through here and coming down at this angle, more or less, and then I can very strongly see my top of the knuckle right here of the medial phalange, little fleshy fold through there, and it's going to come through here, and a little crease in the fleshy fold where it's pressed on, coming out through here. And the thumb is going to, let's round this a little bit and try to get a little bit more articulation. So right here, this is the distal phalange. Remember, the thumb has just a distal phalange and a proximal phalange. The thumb does not have the medial phalange. Then we have the nail through here. And a little bit of right here, this is the proximal phalange, and we see the bone structure through here. So it's not important to know every single bone or muscle in the hand, but it definitely helps when you're trying to add all the pieces and put everything together in place. And so then we have these flexor tendons that come through here, we'll have a little fold through there. And then we have the ulna. And on this side, we have the radius. Remember, it's thicker through here, and it gets thinner up in here. We actually, most people have a tendency to make the wrist too thin, which it's not. And we need to come in here so that we get this shape. So we have this angle through here. I can lower this just a little bit, get a little more power. Raise this up just a tiny bit more. And then we've got some folds that come through here. We have this knuckle coming down in here, this one coming in here behind, this one coming in here at this angle. We have a little fleshy fold in here, and so forth. So all we're trying to do is just get a quick gesture, get a feeling for the anatomy and the expression of the overall expression of the hand. And then this area in here is going to fall into shadow. And I'll do a time lapse, and I'll go ahead and shade this afterwards, so you can see what it's like through the process of shading it. But the initial block-in usually happens pretty quickly. You just want to try to get all the expression. So this is a clenched fist from the front view, just a very fast, quick gesture drawing. Then if I were trying to make this as a finished drawing, and I'll go back and clean this up and shade it so that you can see a little bit more information. But ultimately we'd have a highlight coming right in through here, highlight in this area. The top portion of these knuckles would have a highlight, and we'd have a highlight through here and on the nail, and then some of the side planes will fall into shadow. The side plane here of the thumb is all going to fall into shadow. Everything that's the top hits would have light. Everything that falls away would be absent of light. So that's a quick gesture on the hand, and I will go ahead and do a little bit more work on this in a time lapse so that you can work on your own gesture drawings in the meantime. Okay, so that's the fourth one I usually do in the series. So again, I usually start with doing the palm side of the hand, then I'll do the side view, looking at it from this angle, and then I'll do the back view of the hand, and the last thing I do is a clenched fist. So we do that in class, and then I'll do a series of events, other activities where they'll draw from each other's hands. And if we have enough time and I have a pretty adept group of kids, we'll do multiple hands together in some sort of interaction. It can be representational of a number of things. Some years we've even done drawing activities of the hands where we had them use sign language and come up with different expressions and words through the use of drawing hands. So there's lots of potential with gesture drawing. The key is to, again, to always have them start light and then gradually get darker as they move along, so that, because the hands are so difficult and so challenging, fingers can move. If they learn the idealized proportion, it makes it real easy to get to the first initial stage, and then they can move on from there. So did anybody do a drawing of the clenched fist that they felt comfortable with sharing at this point? It'd be awesome to see if somebody tried one. Nope, that's okay.
I have a question.
Yes,
I have a question.
sure.
I'm okay, let me turn on my camera. I'm literally surrounded by charts of doing the hands, okay?
Yes.
So my concern as I'm drawing this is as a representation, the images that you're giving, and I did come up with a bit of a hand, but even though we draw lightly, generally for the first draft, it's hard to see on camera the light lines that you're doing.
Yes, I know.
So,
I
uh,
understand.
yeah. So even though we darken them as we go, it's still, hard for the imagery. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah,
But
and I apologize. The when I draw in my classes, I actually I would do these demonstrations maybe 4 times larger than life, and I use a dark charcoal. It's not charcoal, but it's new pastel, which is like a Conte, and
okay.
kids can see it across the room 50 feet away. Even when I begin lightly, you can still clearly see it. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of when you draw small in a confined space.
It's
Some of the other drawings that I have on the YouTube channel that you can access, I do the initial drawing in advance and then talk about it so that you can clearly see all the lines. But a lot of my students, they have said they would like to see how they can't figure out how to start. So when I explain just with a small triangle, a small rectangle, and so forth, they have found that to be helpful. Even though it's difficult to see, they can kind of, if they have a larger screen, they can see it, but still, it's difficult to see. I definitely agree.
yeah, online it's a little bit harder, but
Yeah.
yeah, I get it, and we don't have a lot of time. I could probably spend a lot more time on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like with some of the activities that I'll do at Drawing Hands, I mean, we'll work in an hour and a half, 2 hour session, and we'll just do one or two things and work on it the whole time period.
yeah, yeah.
So also
Very
kind of
cool though.
confining a lot of information into a really tight space. So, but
But
I
thank
feel
you.
like if you can kind of get the concept of the rectangle, the triangle, and the basic proportions, it makes it much easier to get something that's fairly decent, even because I've done it even with elementary kids, and they actually, if they kind of follow some of those concepts, they actually can draw a pretty decent hand. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I work with elementary,
Yes.
so it's simplifying it, and visuals are very helpful. But this is already helping me, so
Oh, good.
I do appreciate. Thank you, though.
Sure. And then I have like a whole playlist of probably 7 or 8 different videos that are at my YouTube channel that you can click on. And some of them are just going over the anatomy with the bone structure. Some of them are demonstrations. So there's a variety of different things there.
What will you post those before the end of the session?
Yeah, I try. I'm not sure if anyone was able to access. Let me see if I put this in now. Here, just 1 second. I granted access to the folder, but you may have to just go to the folder to get it because I don't know if it's allowing people just to get it from the one document. If you can't get this one document that I just put in the chat,
Okay.
you can probably go to this link and just get the different things that are in the
It works. Somebody said it works, so good.
Oh, okay. I can't tell. Some people are having trouble and some people were having difficulty.
Okay.
But I think the second one, you can actually go to the folder link and access. There's a number of documents in there that I was letting people use, including a series, like a long list of ideas for in a lesson plan, and so forth.
Okay.
So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, hands are hard.
Yeah. Well, and then I stress with my students too, because ultimately, what's really important is you want to know the bone structure. It's helpful to know the muscle structure, but in the end, when you have the flesh and skin on it, you need to just draw your hand. So if you can learn the proportions and then study whatever you see in front of you is the ultimate goal. And that's why I always express to them to learn to draw, to capture the character and the gesture is more important than specifically drawing the hand. You want the mood and the emotion of the hand. Hands can capture so much expression and emotion. And if they can do something in 2 to 5 minutes and do something very expressive, it's fantastic. If you want to do, oftentimes when you do these really long, highly detailed drawings, they lose some of the excitement that a gesture drawing will have.
How long would you suggest for a gesture? How long of a period of time do you think a gesture drawing should be?
Usually when I do the activity in my class where I do their palm side, their back side, the side, and the clenched fist, I give just 5 minutes for each one. So they can do them all easily in a period, and get the gesture. And then I'll give them freedom to go back, and sometimes we'll do a second set where they look at the front view, but maybe the front view, the first front view, they had their hand just simple like this. Maybe the next time I have them do their fingers or peace sign or something different, but it's still a front view, but then they get the foreshortening of the finger. So they're working then on some other drawing of element principles, by changing, because it's infinite, all the different positions you can put your hands and fingers in. So I also will talk about cylinders and shapes and whatnot, so that for shading principles as well.
Cool.
So
Okay.
I don't know. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Okay, so this next thing, and I'm not sure if people were able to access it. Let me hang on one second. Oh, well, actually, let me just show you real quick. So, because it was so hard to see. So these were the actual drawings. So actually, both these first two, these two are in that playlist on YouTube. These were drawn in advance, so they're very easy to see. These next four were the gesture drawings that were done really light to show the process, because this was in part a request from students asking to hear what I think about and explain how I begin the process. And so this is the first one we watched, and this was the drawing from the second one we watched. You can find those at that Google Drive link too, if you just want to print those out. And so sometimes I'll do these I also will then do these demonstrations in class, for the students. And then they can also, I will also give some of these as a handout where they will draw these, so they can draw a finished piece as where they have to include all the detail, in addition to the gesture drawing. Because ultimately, it's nice to start with a gesture drawing, but get to where you have a finished product. And so I tried to cover each of those steps in the process. But so let me just, so now we're going to kind of switch the train of thought a little bit to the last section here, which I'm hoping you guys can access I'm hoping I had included it in the invitation to the presentation, and let me just do this now. So this is the worksheet. Um, and the students really love this. I have all the anatomical models. If I go down to here to this next image, um, so let me just. So if I go down to this next image, I have all these anatomical models, and I will set them up in my classrooms so the kids can visually see these and get a sense of the scale, and then they can look for the similarities and the differences. And especially the new students, this is all new to them. So the idea behind this is using observational and analytical skills. I want them to try to look at each of the models and try to distinguish which animal they think they belong to, and whether it is a hand, forepaw, or hoof, or whether it is a foot, hand, or hind paw and hoof. And I was hoping you guys wouldn't mind doing this. If you're, I hope you're able to access this and we're able to download it to your computer. But the PDF here is a fillable form. And so, for example, what we do here is the first one, the American black bear. We would look through these models, anatomical models, and they each are assigned a number. And you try to look through and using your observational skills and analytical skills, try to see if you can figure out which animal the skeletal model belongs to. And then I have included in here, so the American black bear is the first one. So here's a photo, an image of an American black bear, so you can kind of get a sense of the animal, what its forelimbs look like. And then you would go back into this section in here and look through each of the models and try to see if you can figure out which one that belongs to. And the idea is it the American black bear, when you look through those models, can you see one that would be for the front forepaw, the front hand, the equivalent of a hand, or is there one that could be the back foot? And to make this more challenging, not every of the anatomical models, there can be more than one anatomical model that belongs to an individual. And there's, in some cases, there may be only a foot or there may be only a hand. Just a helpful hint, the modern human, there is more than one hand and more than one foot. But some of the others, there may only be one of each. So what I thought what we do here is just spend a couple of minutes on each one. I'll set a little timer here. I have a little timer, and I'll set it for maybe 1 minute, and we'll go through these one at a time, and then we'll share out. We'll go over the answers and see how well you guys did. You don't have to share your answers, but we'll just go over it and see how you did. So the first one would be the American black bear. These are the models. And first, let me just show you the American black bear image one more time. All right, now we'll go back to the models and I'll set my timer for, I'll set my timer for 1 minute and see if you can, in 1 minute, try to resolve whether there's something that correlates with the American black bear, whether it's a paw, front, the hand, or a foot. Okay, and so that's time. So now, if you figured that out, if you found something that looks like it could be the hand, forepaw, or hoof for the American black bear, you'd enter the number or numbers in this first column. If you thought there was something that would be a hind paw or a foot or hoof, you would enter whatever numbers you thought were in this next section. The next one that we'll cover is the bonobo. The bonobo is one of the four greater apes. Not much is a lot of people are not as familiar with the bonobo as the other greater apes. The greater apes are the orangutan, which is the oldest in the phylogenetic tree. It's the oldest species. The next is the gorilla. And then the chimpanzee and bonobo both split off at the same time, and then they separated from each other and became two separate species.
Bonobos have the big nose, right?
They are darker than they're very similar to chimpanzees, and they were commonly referred to as pygmy chimpanzees. It wasn't until they start the era of genetic testing and whatnot they realized they're two distinct species.
Interesting.
And you rarely, if ever, see them in zoos. And the kids like this part though, because basically it's the others are a patriarchal society. The bonobos are a matriarchal society, and the females definitely control the roost, so to speak. But all activities, nothing. They're highly sexual. They're considered the hippies of the primate world. So they don't usually have them in zoos because they're constantly mating throughout the day, nonstop. And you can just see a mom walking through with their young child, and they're like, "Mommy, mommy, what are they doing?" So you don't see them in zoos very often, but they're a fantastic species. They're way less violent than the others. They're really interesting. So anyway, so here's a picture of the bonobos. And as you can see, they're very similar to chimpanzees, but they're much darker in coloration. Highly intelligent. The bonobos and the chimpanzees are genetically the closest to humans. But you can see their hands. So now when you go back here to the anatomical models, and I'll set my timer for a minute again, and try to see if you can figure out if there's a hand or a foot that might belong to the bonobo. And a little bit of a helpful hint is thinking that they are referred to as a pygmy chimpanzee. So they're a little bit smaller than the chimpanzees. And that's time for the bonobo. So if you saw something that you felt was a hand, forepaw, or hoof, you would write the number or numbers right here. And if you felt, or you can do it on scratch paper as well. But and also foot, hind paw, or hoof, you can insert any information in there. And if you felt like there wasn't one of each, you would just leave it blank. So the next is the chimpanzee. Very similar to the bonobo. And let me scroll down here and get a picture of the chimpanzee. So here's a chimpanzee. Again, they're closely related to the bonobo. So you can look at the hands and get a feeling for the gesture and character of the hands. And then I'll go back here to the models and look through those to see using observational skills and trying to analyze and see if something might be a hand or a foot or maybe more than one of those. And got my timer going here. Okay. So that's the time for that. So you'd come up here, chimpanzee, hand, forepaw, hoof, and write the number that you think correlates with that. And same with the foot. So next we move on to the domestic dog. And it's so let me scroll down through here real quick and we'll get to the dog. And I chose a Siberian Husky. I have had Huskies for years and love Huskies. But if you look at the forepaw and the back leg, and then we'll go back to the anatomical models and see what you can come figure out with this. Is there something there that could be a forepaw or a hind paw, and what's the number? And then I'll set this, since we've been looking at these for a while, I can shorten this a little bit. So this will be 30 seconds to try to see what we can come up with. And it's funny, some of these are kind of obvious what they may or may not belong to, but some of them not so obvious. It can be a challenge. And some of them are tricky. Okay. So now we go up and enter the information here next to the domestic dog. All right. Now the next one is the domestic horse. So we will scroll down here, have an image of an Arabian horse. And you can kind of look at the hind legs, the forelegs, and think about the shape and so forth. And then I'll go back up here to the anatomical models. And this might be a little bit easier in one regard, but not so much in another regard. So 30 seconds and you can get those numbers figured out. And some of this gets super interesting when you start doing the comparative anatomy part with the kids, and they end up learning so much about anatomy just while doing art. Okay. So now we go up here, domestic horse, and enter in the numbers, whether you think it is the equivalent of a hand, forepaw, or front hoof, or foot, hind paw, or hind hoof. And the next one will be the Eastern Mountain Gorilla. The Eastern Mountain Gorilla is a lot like the difference between the bonobo and the chimpanzee. The Eastern Mountain Gorilla is very dark. There's two species of gorillas. The other gorilla has a sort of a reddish tint to it, but this is the Eastern Mountain Gorilla. There's really large, powerful animals, but quite shy. And so we'll go back here again and we'll look through the anatomical models and see if you can find either a hand or a foot or multiple that belong to the Eastern Mountain Gorilla. And the other gorilla is the lowland gorilla. And they have kind of a reddish tint. Okay, so now next step, we'll move on to the greater flying fox. This particular species has made a huge impact on in the world the last couple of years. So the greater flying fox is the largest of the bats. It's a fruit bat, and this is the greater flying fox. They actually can get pretty big. So now scroll back up here so you can look at the anatomical models and see what number you find for the greater flying fox. And then figure out whether there's hind feet or forelimbs, hind limbs, forelimbs, hand, foot, and so forth. Bats are actually, their anatomy is strikingly similar to humans in many ways. It's kind of amazing. So then next we'd come back up here, the greater flying fox, and enter the number whether you think there's a hand, forepaw, or hoof, and enter whatever numbers you think may correlate with the foot, hind paw, or hoof. Next, we move on to the harbor seal. So let's scroll down through the images again till we get to the harbor seal. This will be kind of this is one of the challenging ones. So here's a harbor seal. They have a little bit of a hind in there. Then there's the forelimb, hind limb. Okay. And now we go back up into here and we'll look through the anatomical models and try to figure out what if any of those belongs to either the forelimb or hind limb of the harbor seal. Okay, so now we're gonna skip up here. So this is where you, again, just like the others, you enter the numbers, whether you think it's forepaw, hind limb, and so forth. Now, modern human. A couple of these I gave away because I showed some of the models at the beginning of the presentation. I think we all know what humans, what they'll fall into, so we'll skip going down to that. And I'll just, a helpful hint is there's more than one of the human. So you can try to figure out the numbers for the hand and feet and see how well we work this out, what we come up with. Okay. I'm trying to get through this quickly, so might be rushing you a little bit now. Next is the North American manatee. So we'll try to figure out, now let me scroll down through all these images. And we'll get to a manatee so you have an idea what it looks like. And here's our North American manatee. You can see they have one huge flipper in the back, and then they have a couple of forelimbs in the front. And they are a mammal. So unlike sharks don't have a skeletal structure, it's all cartilage. The manatee has a full skeletal structure just like the human. So we'll go up here to the anatomical models and try to figure out if there's a forelimb or a hind limb that belongs in here to the manatee? And hopefully, some of the things you've noticed now, looking at all these different animals, that a lot of the anatomical structure is remarkably similar. It's amazing. So, if your students actually learn the anatomy of a human hand or human foot, they'll know the anatomy of so many other animals. It's unbelievable. So you'd enter those numbers for the manatee up here. Now we go to the orangutan, which is the oldest in the lineage of the greater apes. And they are primarily arboreal. They spend most of their time in trees. Um, and I have two different photos of in here included. Oh no, I took the other one out. So this is the orangutan with the baby, mother with the baby. And you can see the gesture in the hand. And now we'll go back up here. And while they're not particularly tall, uh, their hands and feet are quite large. So now you can look through those and try to see if you can see anything in there that would belong to the orangutan. Okay, and then we go up here, we'll enter the information in there for the orangutan. And last, I'll go quickly scroll back down through all these again, so you can see the ostrich. And this is the ostrich. They are the largest of the flightless birds. And now we'll go back up here. This one's kind of a little bit more obvious to figure out, but it has some really interesting anatomical details that the kids enjoy. So now we look through here and try to figure out which one belongs to the ostrich. Okay, and then now you would just enter what you feel correlates up here with the number and with the ostrich. So let me stop sharing this now. And I want to show, I'm just going to show this real quick. Because you also, I have all these anatomical models, but I originally started doing this quite some time ago with images. And so I have all the models you saw in that one group. I have here in, I've also photographed them all in separate individual photos. So I can lay these out in a table when I don't have an area or access to have all the skeletal models out, or I'm worried that it might get damaged. I can put out images and we can do uh, the same process that I would do where I would have all the actual models on the tables. So, and this is helpful now for you guys because you can also look at them a little bit more closely in detail. And so I have every one of those models, all 23 of the models, photographed that way. And what I also did, which you can access for the folder, if you want to make it a little bit fun, is I have all the anatomical models that we just went through, and I have them all labeled with the anatomy so you can see the similarities where they have carpals, metacarpals, and the phalanges. So here's the human hand. And here's a little helpful hint now. This was the harbor seal. So you can see the carpals, the metacarpals, the proximal phalanges, the medial phalanges, and the nails are the distal phalanges. This is showing the one bone followed by two bones, followed by lots of little bones, followed by digits, which is a tendency for all animals, birds, and so forth. They all have a humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. And then this helpful hint, this is the domestic dog forepaw. And this is basically would be the human thumb. This would be our pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, and pinky. And the dogs, they call it a dew claw, but it basically is almost identical to the human hand. And these are the carpals. This is the hind foot, which is missing the opposable thumb or the opposable big toe. So they only have 4 toes on their hind foot. Then this one is actually the American black bear. This is the thumb, pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, pinky. This is a human hand. And I'll give you the answers to the other thing through. I just wanted to go through this real quickly so you can see. This is really interesting because this is the horse's hoof. The horse's hoof, this is basically horses walk on their front middle finger. This it would, if this was a human hand, this would be our finger. This would be the phalange. This would be the proximal phalanx, the medial phalanx, and the distal phalanx, also referred to in the horse as the long pastern, short pastern, and the coffin bone. But it's basically our middle finger. And I'll show you the models here in just a second of a couple of these. I just wanted to go over a couple so you could see. And this was the horse upper leg. So this is actually the carpals. This is the metacarpal, and it's the third metacarpal. You can see where the two, what would be the pointer finger and the ring finger have fused on. They're not necessarily anymore. And then we have our finger, proximal, medial, and distal. So identical anatomy to the human hand, but their function dictates their form. And because they move differently, their form is very different. And this is the last one I just wanted to show you real quick on the handout. And you can also access these. I put them in that file folder that you can access from the link if you would like to use those as well. This is the ostrich. They have the slight variation from the human. So they have 4, equivalent of 4 phalanges. And what this would be their middle finger. They walk on their fingers. And this would be their ring finger. They do not have the pointer finger, the thumb, or their pinky. They are the only bird. It's referred to as didactyl. They're the only bird that walks on 2 fingers, which is really unique and unusual. And then we get to the human and so forth. So I just wanted to show you those. But now, just for fun, what I kind of wanted to do is, so if you have your sheet there, let me pop up that one picture. Let's go back to this. So we're back to the bear. The American black bear. So the American black bear, number 5 and number 11, number 5 and number 11 were the forepaw. And number 11 is what's referred to as a forensic bear paw. So a lot of times they keep these in wildlife centers where people hike out into the wilderness, because frequently people come across those bones and think they're human remains and will call it in. And the reason this happens is that the bear paw is so similar to the hand, and when people come along and take the claws, then people will frequently think that they found human remains. So that's referred to as a forensic bear paw. So number 5 is here, and number 11 is the American black bear. The bonobo is number 14 and number 15. They're these two right here. And they are smaller than the other greater apes, and that's helpful information. The chimpanzee were number 16 and number 17. Oh, I should point out number 14 was the hand, number 15 was the foot. On the chimpanzee, number 16 is the hand, and number 17 is the foot. And I'll briefly here in a minute explain how you can tell the difference between the hand and the foot. They have an opposable big toe and opposable big thumb, so it makes it super confusing. Next was the domestic dog. The forepaw is the one with the thumb. The hind paw was missing its big toe. The domestic horse, these both were actually forelimbs, not the hind limb. They're both the forelimb, and then they walk on their middle fingers. So it's number 7 and 8. But this phalange, this part here, number 7, can actually be in both because it has the phalange on the forelimb and on the hind limb. But the area above here, the carpals and metacarpals, are different on the horse than the tarsals that would be on the hind limb. The gorilla is 21 and number 20, these two. And number 20 is the foot, number 21 is the hand. The greater flying fox was the bat, and it is the hand, and it has all the same anatomical structure as a human hand. Imagine if we were bats, our hands would be bigger than our entire body. The hands of a bat are much larger than their entire body. And then the wings connect through each of those digits. Number 2 is the harbor seal. They have claws. So this is the harbor seal, and they have a forelimb. There is no representation for the hind limb. The modern human hands were number 1, number 12, and number 6. And then we had 2 feet. We had one with just showing the tarsals, and then the other one here showing the tibia and fibula. So North American manatee was this large one right here. And there's the thumb and each of the fingers, and then the radius and the ulna. Orangutan, which has the largest hands and feet of any of the greater apes. This is the hand, number 22. Number 19 is the foot. And lastly, which you may have figured out fairly easily, is the ostrich. The ostrich is number 9. All right, so let me stop sharing this. And just to kind of let you end on something, just to give you a sense of scale. See, it's kind of a bummer that we didn't get to do this in person because the scale is impressive. So this is the orangutan hand, to give you an idea. And this is the human hand. Even though humans stand much taller than orangutans, they spend so much time in the forest and the trees. They have huge, powerful hands. This is the gorilla hand. So very large. So one last thing I wanted to leave you with was how to tell the difference between the foot and the hand. Because this is a gorilla's foot, really resembles the human hand. Has the thumb, what would be the thumb, but it's an opposable big toe. But what it has here is this section right here is the talus bone, and that's the area that the tibia and fibula move back and forth on. And so when you see this talus bone, this soft area right here, this is the human foot. Whenever you see this, and you see this also on the gorilla, the orangutan, and some of the others, that distinguishes it between a foot and a hand. It's very unique and distinct. All right.
I failed, Michael.
Oh, you did?
I failed.
It's kind of fun. It takes a while to figure it out.
The dog and the ostrich and the horse.
That's actually pretty good though. But it's amazing because they have so many that are so similar. Like what the kids have found, because if they learned each of the bones and the metacarpals and phalanges, and they're like shocked that all of a sudden they'll look at an animal skeleton and they'll actually know the names, the humerus, the radius, the ulna. And I had a couple of students a few years ago that got so excited at this, they both are now veterinarians. So it's kind of cool.
It's cool. It's cool. It's interesting to actually see them in person.
Yeah.
You can share them with your class.
And so what I do is, like, ultimately, it's just a kind of a fun, interesting way to learn how to draw and learn a lot of other stuff along the way. So
Very
each
cool.
one of these will go over all this stuff and whatnot, but then I have them draw them all, and I'll draw them, and then they'll draw the actual animals and put them in compositions, and we do all sorts of stuff. In
A
addition,
lot of times, yeah, students will do like feet that are too tiny or
Mhm.
too big for the animal.
Yeah.
So it's great to see that proportion. What level do you teach this to?
I teach predominantly at the high school, and then dual credit classes through UNM Taos. But I have a Taos Arts Club that I do in the summers at the Millicent Rogers Museum and at the Taos Art Museum at the Fashion House. And I'll do all this stuff for all kids like 10 and up.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. So that kind of concludes all the stuff I had. If you let me type in an email address in case somebody has difficulty downloading any of this stuff. Um, you can always contact me at hensleyfineart@yahoo.com, and I can email either a link or the PDFs directly across to you guys. Hopefully people were able to access it from the folder, but in the event you weren't, technology's fickle, so hopefully it'll all work out. So thank you all for your patience and participation. It was I love doing hands. I think they're fantastic, and I work on this on and off throughout the year. So because people have such a fear of hands, I like the kids to get over that fear, and by learning to do it in all sorts of different ways, it makes it kind of fun for them. You're muted.
I was going to say I'm working on them all the time here.
Yeah, they're great. I love them.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody has any other questions or anything. I kind of monopolized most of the evening. You guys can always shoot me an email if you have a question later. Thank you, everyone. Bye.